Step back, now!
You are resisting arrest.
On a sweltering August morning in a small Alabama courthouse, Aisha Coleman walked through the double doors, her heels clicking against the polished floor. She was there for a routine hearing, a minor traffic violation that should have been resolved in minutes. But what unfolded that day would unravel the fabric of justice in ways no one in the room could have predicted. Aisha, a 34-year-old paralegal and mother of two, was about to become the center of a storm that would shake the town, the state, and eventually the nation. It began with a slap, a shocking act of violence from a court officer, and ended with Aisha sitting in the judge's chair, her presence a defiant symbol of resistance and retribution. Aisha had always been meticulous. She double-checked her documents, ensured her navy blazer was pressed, and arrived at the courthouse 15 minutes early. The room was crowded, the air thick with tension and the hum of whispered conversations. She took her seat in the gallery, her folder of paperwork resting on her lap. The judge, a stern older man named Harold Grayson, presided from his elevated bench, his gavel striking with authority as he moved through the docket. Aisha's case was supposed to be straightforward, a disputed speeding ticket from 3 months prior. She had evidence, a dashcam video showing she was within the speed limit, and she was confident the matter would be dismissed. As her case was called, Aisha stood and approached the defendant's table. She presented her evidence calmly, her voice steady but firm. The prosecutor, a young man with a sharp suit and sharper tone, challenged her account, suggesting the dashcam footage was unreliable. Aisha held her ground, citing legal precedents she'd studied in her paralegal training. The exchange grew heated, not because Aisha raised her voice, but because the prosecutor seemed determined to undermine her credibility. Judge Grayson, peering over his glasses, warned her to keep it brief. She nodded, complying, but the tension in the room was palpable. That's when it happened. As Aisha returned to her seat after handing over her documents, a court officer, Deputy Raymond Holt, approached her. Holt, a burly man with a reputation for a short temper, had been standing near the bench, watching the proceedings with a scowl. Without warning, he grabbed Aisha's arm, claiming she was causing a disturbance. Before she could respond, his hand swung, striking her across the face. The courtroom gasped. The sound of the slap echoed, a sharp crack that silenced the murmurs. Aisha stumbled but didn't fall. Her hand went to her cheek, her eyes wide with shock but burning with defiance. The room froze. For a moment, no one moved. Not the judge, not the prosecutor, not the spectators. Aisha's voice broke the silence, steady but laced with fury. "You don't get to do that," she said, staring directly at Holt. "Not to me. Not to anyone." The deputy, caught off guard by her composure, barked at her to sit down, but Aisha didn't budge. Instead, she turned to the judge. "Your Honor, are you going to let this stand? Is this your courtroom?" Judge Grayson, visibly rattled, banged his gavel. "Order! Order!" he shouted, but the room was already spiraling. Spectators whispered, some pulling out phones to record. Another officer moved toward Aisha, but she raised a hand, her presence commanding attention. "I'm not the one breaking the law here," she said, her voice cutting through the chaos. "This man assaulted me in front of you, and you're doing nothing." What happened next defied every expectation. Aisha, instead of retreating, walked toward the bench. The officers hesitated, unsure whether to intervene. The crowd watched, breathless, as she stepped behind the judge's chair. Judge Grayson, red-faced, stood abruptly. "You are out of line, Ms. Coleman," he shouted. But Aisha, undeterred, placed her hands on the back of the chair. "If you won't uphold justice in this room, someone has to," she said. Then, in a move that would be replayed across news outlets for weeks, she sat down in the judge's chair. The act was symbolic, but its impact was seismic. Aisha, a black woman who had been slapped by an officer in a space meant to uphold the law, now occupied the seat of power. The courtroom erupted. Some cheered, others shouted in outrage. Phones captured every second, the footage spreading like wildfire. By the time deputies escorted Aisha out, the video was already trending online, sparking debates about race, power, and justice. Aisha's life before that day had been one of quiet resilience. Born and raised in Montgomery, she grew up in a neighborhood where trust in institutions was scarce. Her mother, a schoolteacher, and her father, a mechanic, instilled in her a fierce work ethic and a belief in standing up for what was right. Aisha excelled in school, earning a scholarship to a local college where she studied legal administration. As a paralegal, she worked long hours at a small law firm, helping clients navigate a system that often seemed stacked against them. She was no stranger to microaggressions, clients who assumed she was the secretary, attorneys who dismissed her expertise, but she had never experienced anything like the violence in that courtroom. The slap wasn't just an assault on Aisha. It was an assault on the very idea of fairness. As she was led out in handcuffs, her mind raced. She knew the risks of her actions, contempt of court, possible jail time, but she also knew the weight of the moment. The world was watching, and she wasn't going to let it look away. By evening, the story was national news. The headline, "Cops Slap Black Woman in Court, She Takes Judge's Seat," dominated social media. Protests erupted outside the courthouse, with demonstrators chanting Aisha's name. Civil rights groups demanded Holt's suspension and an investigation into the court's conduct. The video, raw and unedited, showed Aisha's calm defiance, her refusal to be silenced, and her audacious act of sitting in the judge's chair. It became a rallying cry for those who saw the justice system as a tool of oppression rather than protection. The fallout was swift. Deputy Holt was placed on administrative leave pending an investigation. Judge Grayson issued a statement calling Aisha's actions disrespectful to the court, but stopped short of addressing the slap. The prosecutor, meanwhile, faced scrutiny for his aggressive handling of Aisha's case, with some speculating racial bias. Aisha herself was charged with disorderly conduct and contempt, but her attorney, a seasoned civil rights lawyer named Marcus Tate, argued that the charges were retaliatory. "My client was assaulted in a court of law," Tate said at a press conference. Her response was not disruption. It was a demand for accountability. Aisha's act of sitting in the judge's chair wasn't planned. In interviews later, she described it as a moment of clarity. "I saw that chair and I saw everything it represented: authority, power, justice," she said. "And I thought, if they're not going to use it right, maybe I need to show them how." Her words resonated with millions, particularly Black women who saw in her a reflection of their own struggles against systemic disrespect. The legal battle that followed was grueling. Aisha's case became a lightning rod for broader issues: police misconduct, racial profiling, and the treatment of Black women in public spaces. Her traffic violation, once a minor issue, was overshadowed by the larger narrative. The dashcam footage she'd presented was independently verified, proving she hadn't been speeding. The ticket was dismissed, but that victory felt hollow compared to the fight ahead. Marcus Tate built a case not just for Aisha's defense but for systemic change. He filed a federal lawsuit against the county, alleging civil rights violations. The lawsuit detailed Holt's history of complaints, including prior allegations of excessive force, and criticized the court's failure to intervene. Tate also subpoenaed courthouse security footage, which showed Holt's actions from multiple angles, contradicting his claim that Aisha had been disruptive. Public support for Aisha grew. A crowdfunding campaign raised over $200,000 for her legal fees. Activists organized rallies, and scholars wrote op-eds analyzing the symbolism of her sitting in the judge's chair. Some called it an act of civil disobedience. Others saw it as a reclaiming of power. Aisha, however, remained grounded. She continued working at her law firm, though her employers gave her time off to focus on the case. At home, she shielded her children, a 12-year-old daughter and a 9-year-old son, from the media frenzy, but she couldn't protect them from the questions. "Why did that man hit you, Mommy?" her daughter asked one night. Aisha's answer was simple: "Because some people think they can get away with it. But we're going to show them they can't." The trial for Aisha's charges was set for 3 months later, but the civil rights lawsuit moved faster. Discovery revealed a pattern of misconduct in the county's court system, including disproportionate penalties for black defendants. Aisha's case became a catalyst, forcing the state to confront uncomfortable truths. The governor issued a public apology, and the State Judiciary Commission launched an inquiry into Judge Grayson's oversight of his courtroom. Meanwhile, Aisha became an reluctant icon. She spoke at community events, her poise and eloquence winning over even skeptics. She didn't shy away from the complexity of her actions. "I'm not saying I'm a hero," she told a crowd at a local church. "I'm saying I'm human. And humans deserve respect, especially in a place that's supposed to stand for justice." The investigation into Deputy Holt concluded with his termination, though he faced no criminal charges, a decision that sparked more protests. Aisha's contempt and disorderly conduct charges were eventually dropped, with the judge citing insufficient evidence of intent to disrupt. But the civil rights lawsuit pressed on, seeking not just damages for Aisha but reforms to prevent similar incidents. In a landmark settlement, the county agreed to implement mandatory de-escalation training for court officers and to establish an independent oversight board. Aisha's story didn't end with the settlement. She used her platform to advocate for broader change, working with organizations to address systemic racism in the legal system. She enrolled in law school, determined to become an attorney and fight from within. The image of her in the judge's chair remained a powerful symbol, printed on t-shirts and murals, a reminder that one woman's defiance could spark a movement. Years later, Aisha would reflect on that day in the courthouse. "I didn't wake up planning to make history," she said. "I just wanted to be heard." But sometimes, being heard means taking a seat at the table or the chair, and refusing to move until they listen.